Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all lines are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's call. At that time, please press star one to ask a question. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. Now we'll turn the call over to your host, Irene Ahir. Ma'am, you may begin.
Hello, and welcome to today's FDA webinar. I am Irene Ahir of CDRH's Office of Communication and Education. Today's webinar will provide CDRH's perspective on digital health and will discuss the Center's proposed approach to regulating products that fall under the digital health umbrella. Our discussion will include clarification of 2 final guidance documents as well as 2 draft guidance documents related to this topic. Today, Bakul Patel, Associate Director for Digital Health in CDRH, and Sugato Dek, Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of the Center Director, will provide a brief presentation. Following the presentation, we will open the line for your questions. Other Center subject matter experts are also available to assist with the Q&A portion of our webinar. Now, I give you Bakul.
Thank you, Irene. With that, let me just extend one other thanks from the team here at FDA and CDRH to all attendees on the webinar. Before we start, let me talk about the objective that Irene just highlighted. We also want to point out to folks that we will not be able to take product-specific questions, but mostly this webinar is geared towards providing our understanding, our thinking on the guidances that we publish, and also give a perspective on our approach to digital health and the guidances that we have published, both final and as well as draft. With that, let me start with the presentation and give you a little bit of background on digital health. As you can imagine, digital health technologies are continuously leveraging the ubiquity of connectivity, computing power, and is setting up a path towards better healthcare paradigm as well as ultimately as well as public health. With that, today I'm gonna cover 4 areas. First, we'll start off with our CDRH's vision and approach, and we'll go into the mobile medical apps guidance, that how FDA has taken an approach towards mobile apps and the growing area and excitement that's happening in this field. As a result of that, we will also use the approach that I will highlight into how we took into account reevaluating our existing regulations. And lastly, I will end with sort of a clarification and an overview of our draft guidances as well on general wellness and medical device accessories. We will take questions at the end, so please hold that as highlighted by Irene before. Let me share with you, and as you can see, this is our vision for which stems from our mission to promote and protect public health. And I will not read all the words on the slide, but if you were to glean at this, patients is at the center of our thinking. Patients is a center at our approach. We would like to keep patients in the center and have technologies enable us to advance healthcare, advance public health. So that led us to in the area of digital health, where we're using risk-based approach, which is narrowly tailored and functionality focused, that gives us independence from the advances that platforms can take on. And at the same token, we want technologies to sort of innovate and that will take platforms in to different level while promoting patient engagement, which gets us to a narrowly tailored approach or narrowly tailored functionality focused approach, which leads to protecting patient safety. So that's a very high level perspective and thinking of how we have approached digital health technologies, and we want to promote patient engagement at the same time protect patient safety. We are very cognizant of the fact that technologies will evolve, will become smaller, better, cheaper, and platforms will also evolve. But focusing on technologies will allow us to promote that innovation at the same time take a risk-based approach. With that, you'll see we had embarked on this thinking as early as 2011-12, we started looking at mobile medical apps, and we proposed our guidance on mobile medical apps. We said we'll focus on the traditionally regulated functionality that's either cleared, approved, or otherwise regulated. Our goal is to provide users with the same level of assurance of patient safety. While we are thinking about mobile apps as a whole, we also wanted to provide people with the clarity we are being asked for, is what's considered a medical device or not, what's considered lower risk when we continue to start focusing on this narrow area of our oversight, or narrow focus of our oversight. So in the mobile medical apps guidance that was finalized in September 2013, we provided three large areas. One area which we identified by examples which mobile apps are not considered as medical device. And the next layer up is the lower risk mobile
please state your name.
That meet device definition but may not be considered as mobile medical apps and not be a focus of our oversight. That leaves us with a very small area of mobile medical apps that we termed to represent the areas that we would focus on, or areas of apps that we would focus on. And let me walk through that for a second. So here's our approach. The world of mobile apps was exploding as we were working through the guidance and preparing our approach and articulating that in the document. In the guidance, we talk about types of mobile apps that are not considered medical devices and have no regulatory requirements, or no FDA regulatory requirements. Let me be clear on that. Followed with a lower risk types of mobile apps that may meet the definition of a medical device, but not considered for oversight. We used the term enforcement discretion, and there was a lot of discussions on what that meant, so I'll go over that in a second. It fundamentally means the FDA has laid out a compliance policy which articulates that we would not focus our compliance efforts on those products. That leaves us with our focus of oversight, where that if a mobile app that meets the two-part definition that we defined in the guidance would be the focus of oversight. Very simplistically, let me just share with you that things that were in a different shape, size, or form, when I say things, functionalities that were different shapes, size, or form that existed before and now happens to be in a mobile platform or a mobile way, either in terms of software or other ways, we would consider them to be mobile medical apps. So the definition sort of brings that point into play. That's the part about when mobile apps transform a mobile platform into a regulated medical device. The second part of the definition was if a mobile app is now used as an accessory to a regulated medical device, we would consider that as a mobile medical app as well. Now, we defined the world of oversight into this very small area of what we termed as mobile medical apps. We went in the guidance and highlighted three large principles of what we would consider to be covered in the definition of mobile medical apps. And I've highlighted portions of that first prong, or first definition, or first principle, which talks about displaying, storing, transmitting specific medical device data. And I'll share with you the reason why I've highlighted that, because later on, as I talk through the MDDS guidance, I will show that those factors sort of come into play. Having said that, the guidance actually goes into depth of types of mobile apps that are not medical devices, like medical flashcards, finding the nearest medical facility, or scheduling hospital room or bed space, are not medical devices or does not belong into the FDA jurisdiction. Things that may be considered medical devices but not the focus of oversight are allowing people to track their own health, track their health information, help patients document, show communicate that with their provider, their condition, all the types of things. We have, the document is about 40 pages long, with mostly filled with examples for people to sort of take away our thinking behind and our approach behind mobile apps. We are hoping to accomplish this by when people come up with new technologies, when folks and innovators come up with new technologies, we would want people to glean from this guidance how we would apply and what we would regulate versus what we would not regulate. So as a result of all this discussion and our work in this area, through FDASIA's Section 618, we held a tri-agency work effort that led to the FDASIA Health IT report, which proposed a strategy and recommendations for health IT as a whole. During that process, through extensive public and work group feedback, we heard from the stakeholders that we as agencies should address ambiguities that exist in our regulations and that have cross-cutting between other agencies. We also heard that we should be reevaluating current regulations. Specifically, in the Health IT report, we responded by saying that we would be providing further clarity on general wellness and disease-related claims to Health IT and provide more clarity on our approach towards medical device accessories are the two specific areas. But before we get into those two specific areas, let me share with you what led us to the reevaluation of the MDDS or Medical Device Data Systems rule. So here's what we proposed we finalized in 2011, February 15th, is what we call as a certain types of technologies that we call as medical device data systems. They're intended by a manufacturer to transfer, storage, convert, or display medical device data, and excluding those technologies that were controlling other medical devices or to be used in active patient monitoring. There was a long process that we went through that took public comments on what was active patient monitoring, what should be covered under MDDS. But at the end of that discussion, which started in 2008 and finalized in 2011, we highlighted what should be the narrow focus of medical device data system rule. When you look at the approach that we have highlighted in the Health IT report, the approach that we have taken in the mobile medical apps guidance, and our philosophy of how to promote patient engagement and protect patients, at the same time be functionality dependent and not platform dependent, and take a risk-based approach, we took a harder look at the medical device data systems rule. And here's what we and in addition to that, we looked at medical image storage and communication device rules as well. And we concluded that these types of products, or these types of products identified in the regulations, were generally considered lower risk and were already classified as Class 1. Systems that record, share, and use medical device data have become a significant portion of the connected healthcare system. Also drives towards intercommunication of functionality, which is foundational for interoperability of the medical device data and a digital health ecosystem. In June 2014, we proposed a guidance which basically said we will take a hands-off approach towards these types of devices that are identified in medical device data systems, medical image storage, and communication regulations. Our intent was to continue to provide the clarity in digital health, narrow our focus on higher risk product, and also, more importantly, create an impetus for devices to share data and ultimately become interoperability in this larger health IT/digital health ecosystem. So fast forward, after public comment, here's what we heard back from the stakeholders. Most comments, we received about 500 plus comments to the medical device data system draft guidance. Most supported the re-regulatory policy for MDDS, suggested specific edits to clarify the language, and also asked us to be clear on what we meant by active patient monitoring. And some actually did ask us to finalize and make a permanent regulation and not just a guidance. We thought that going further and finalizing the guidance would provide the next level of certainty for folks. In response to the feedback in the final guidance, we maintained the proposed policy without any changes. We added additional language in the background section addressing the comments that we received to explaining to folks what we meant by medical device data systems, as we said in the final rule. Also clarified with examples, clarified what we meant by active patient monitoring. So you should find that helpful. We did also propose in the draft medical device data systems guidance that we would make conforming edits to the mobile medical apps guidance as well, so they're consistent with the policy described in the MDDS guidance. So we made those changes as well. So here's what the final guidance looks like, and the final guidance published on February 9, 2015 clarifies our intent or confirms our intent that we would not enforce compliance with regulatory controls that apply to MDDS, to medical image storage devices, and medical image communication devices. We did also say that in the guidance, MDDS, as we said in our final rule, MDDS rule, that these products are not intended for active patient monitoring or modified medical device data or controlled medical devices. That's, again, consistent with the rule that we had. The MDDS guidance conforms or the scope of products that fit MDDS as defined in the rule. The guidance just extends and enforces compliance policy for those products identified in those rules. So I wanted to make sure folks understood that. So let me share what we did in the mobile medical apps guidance as well. As you notice, I had highlighted a few words in the first principle in the mobile medical apps guidance that we would consider mobile medical apps. And this is how we edited that language, which is what we had proposed in the draft as well. And we also moved the types of MDDS type functionalities into the category of enforcement discretion or things that we would not enforce compliance towards. While this was happening, FDA and CDRH had maintained a website and a email address that folks could ask questions on specific products. We updated the guidance with those additional examples that we had added to the website as well. And when I mentioned the email address, it was the mobile medical apps at fda.hhs.gov. This email address was intended to provide quick triage and sort of clarification on our approach and product-specific answers to whether a product would fit into one of the three categories highlighted in the guidance or not. As a result of the process that we went through and extensive public input, we have the website that we promised to keep it live, keep it current with the examples and the questions that we get. But also internally, we have set up a committee that would provide coordination to maintain consistent policy decisions related to mobile medical apps. And that's the email address that we use for folks to ask questions to us that gets looked over by a dedicated staff who maintains policy decisions consistent. With that, let me turn over to the two draft guidances that I mentioned earlier. Continuing our clarity in the world of digital health and continuing our thinking and the approach that I highlighted in the beginning of being risk-based, functionality-focused, and narrowly tailored. General wellness guidance was something that was requested, and we had committed to providing clarity on how FDA/CDRH specifically for devices and technologies would consider general wellness products and what claims we would be allowed. So let me just walk through some of the highlights of the guidance. The policy does not intend to examine, we said in the guidance, we don't intend to examine whether products that are either considered low risk are medical devices or not. We are fundamentally saying if they're devices, we don't intend to, if general wellness products are devices or meet the definition of the FDA Act, Section 201H, we don't, as FDA, intend to enforce compliance with regulatory requirements. So what are the products covered? Products intended only for general wellness use are covered in this guidance. Products inherently present a very low risk to user safety. If you look at the guidance, it will probably highlight, you understand what we meant by very low risk. And what we meant by there was not have invasive or have a irreversible effect on human body. So that's one of the principles in the guidance as well. Products intended for general wellness use can be marketed. In other words, can claim obviously without any reference to disease or conditions, we would consider them general wellness products. But when such products with a disease-related general wellness claims contain references that is well understood that a healthy lifestyle may reduce the risk of impact, would also be considered as a low risk. So I wanted to highlight that very specific point for people to sort of understand what the policy sort of articulates. I'm going to pause it right here, and I'm going to turn it over to Sugata Day, who Irene introduced earlier, and he's going to talk a little bit about an overview on the accessories guidance. Sugata?
Thank you, Bakul. The draft guidance on medical device accessories was issued on January 20th of this year. This document is intended to clarify the definition of the term accessory and to propose a risk-based framework to classify these devices. More specifically, the guidance proposes utilization of the de novo classification process to allow manufacturers or other parties to seek risk-based classification of accessories of a new type. As you can see on this slide, CDRH defines accessories as devices intended to support, supplement, or augment the performance of one or more parent devices. In brief, the device supports the performance of the parent device by enabling or facilitating that device to perform according to its intended use. The device supplements the performance of the parent device if it adds a new function or a new way of using the parent device without changing its intended use. Lastly, a device augments the performance of the parent device by enabling it to perform its intended use more safely and effectively. Once an article has been determined to be an accessory, the FDA plans to proceed to consider the risk of the accessory when used as intended and what level of regulatory controls are necessary to provide reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness. This risk-based analysis is the same that is used in the classification of any medical device. In practice, an accessory is either classified in the same class as the parent device or is classified in a different classification, either lower or higher. In some situations, an accessory may have a lower risk profile than that of the parent device, and therefore may warrant being regulated in a lower class. The last section of the guidance outlines how the de novo classification process can be used to request risk-based classification of new types of accessories. This process provides a pathway to Class 1 or Class 2 classification for which general controls or general and specific controls provide reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness, but for which there are no legally marketed parent devices. The guidance lays out the recommended content for such a de novo submission. I'll now hand it back to Bakul.
Thanks, Sugata. I do want to remind folks that the draft of general wellness guidance and the draft accessory guidance are proposals, and the intent of this webinar and the discussion that we want to have today is to solicit comments towards those guidances and suggest if people have ideas on suggesting either better clarifying the guidance or make it clear for folks who are implementing or using the guidance would be very helpful as you submit comments to the docket. I do want to remind folks both the general wellness as well as the draft accessories guidance comments are due by April 20th, 2015. So we would hope folks would actually provide us input so we can turn around and finalize the guidance based on that input. I want to take this presentation now, summarize where the center is heading for digital health. We believe digital health will be beneficial and drive better health outcomes at the end of the day. we also believe that it will enable patient empowerment and help everybody in the healthcare ecosystem to drive efficient healthcare decisions. Our policies, I'll reiterate again, are towards promoting patient engagement technologies, continuing to provide regulatory clarity by using a focused regulatory approach, and really working with stakeholders to understanding their needs and expectations so we can better articulate how we as CDRH can play a role in promoting and protecting public health. With that, let me pause right here. This is where we can start the question and answer session. Again, I would like to remind folks that we will be taking questions on clarification on the guidances. If you have specific product-related questions, we can also connect later on. You can talk to DICE or email dice@fda.hhs.gov or contact DICE through their phone line. So with that, I will turn it back over to Irene.
We'll now take questions.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1, unmute your phone and record your name when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your question, you may press *2. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name when prompted. One moment for the first question, please. We do have our first question. Greg Slobodkin, your line is open.
Thank you. Mukul, if you could just sort of walk everybody through how you see the dividing line between FDA and FTC when it comes to regulating mobile apps. I ask that question because, as you're well aware, FTC seems to be taking a very active role lately in cracking down on unsubstantiated claims that are made by marketers and manufacturers of mobile health apps. And it seems almost as if that the FDA is sort of deferring to FTC when it comes to these kinds of actions. So what's your perspective?
Yeah, so Greg, thanks for the question. I can definitely talk about FDA, but I won't be able to talk about FTC's role and perspective and their, and as you mentioned, they're taking an active role or not. That's definitely not an FDA purview. But the way I can just share with you, FDA and FTC have traditionally worked together on many other products. So FTC has a very defined focus on promotion and advertising, and we have a very specific role in where the lines are for promoting and promotion and advertising from a public health perspective. So that's where the role are. I'm not sure there's a large overlap in terms of the scientific evidence that we require for clearing and approving products. That's a different discussion. But that's where we generally focus from a public health perspective. And as you may recall, this is not the first time FTC has taken interest in mobile apps specifically, but in other cases, previously in 2011, and they also had taken some actions. But that has nothing to do with where FDA's jurisdiction stops and where FTC's jurisdiction starts.
We'll now take the next question.
Thank you. And the next question is from Nathaniel Greer. Your line is open.
Yes, hi, thank you. So can you speak maybe to how this is going to impact such technologies as patient-reported outcomes in clinical research, with bringing your own device and so deploying apps to potential subjects in clinical research, and how that interacts with the clinical research space?
So from my very simplistic perspective, And in the world of digital health, I believe as in other studies and other research areas, technology has sort of become an enabler towards collecting that information. From my perspective, I think digital health technologies will get us to the next level of technology enabling patient-reported outcomes, and that may be just one part of the research that will happen, and sort of bring more information to the table as decisions for evidence come together.
So I guess maybe more specifically then, from a perspective of the app itself, obviously we have to look at the perspective of what the data is being collected and how it's being collected in the mobile app, and to what it would fall underneath from a regulatory perspective, from a compliance perspective, from a med device perspective.
Yeah, so if you're talking specifically about clinical research, when I meant tools, there are just different tools that you use in clinical research, and you may have to look at what those requirements are for clinical research using mobile tools or other techniques that may end up into patient-reported outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Your next question is from Bernie Bosley. Your line is open.
I was wondering if FDA is looking to define consensus standards around MMAs like they do for other product and therapies. Reason I ask is I assume there are still some standards that apply to MMAs, you know, like the HIPAA or NAST, cybersecurity, the ISO risk standards and things along those lines.
So in general, I would suggest, this is Bakul, and so we do work on standards on various platforms and various technologies. And when I use the description of functionality focus, we really want to be ubiquitous on types of platforms and technologies that exist. And if standards exist for what techniques should be used for protecting certain types of platforms or technology, we would probably rely on those. So I guess the answer is I don't have a specific standards area that I can point towards that we are working towards. But yes, if cybersecurity is valuable and an important consideration for a device that previously existed in other forms, we would expect the same kind of application of that particular consideration in the mobile app as well.
Okay, thank you.
And your next question is from Patricia Bass. Your line is open.
Yes, my question concerns the person who's sitting in the IRB compliance arena, and I'm trying to understand how this would affect our looking at mobile devices or under that guidance or under the proposed guidance. If a device is considered in the enforcement discretion area, does that mean that as an IRB looking at these kinds of devices or not devices that are under development but under clinical investigation, that if a device, all things considered, is going to be under discretion, that an IRB would not have to think about deciding whether something is a non-significant risk device because it's in the enforcement discretion category. Is that correct?
Let me hand it over to Linda Ritchie, who is from Office of Device Evaluation, who can probably also answer this question.
Good afternoon. I think your question is getting more at the definition of a non-significant risk study, and that's more related to how this technology might be used to help patients, and that's a little different than how we would regulate the device itself. So in terms of, from my perspective about what the IRB would need to do with these devices, you would still need to evaluate the safe use of these devices regardless of the regulatory paradigm that FDA would come up with these. Most times when we say something's under enforcement discretion, we believe that the use of those devices is low risk. So you can certainly use that as part of your decision-making process. But as to whether it's a non-significant risk study, I think that's a different question.
But actually the device itself, because once you make that determination, then that's deemed an IDE. So I was just trying to think that in terms of making that determination, if it's not going to be considered a device, we would not need to make that determination, apart from its level of risk, say, as used in the study.
This is Brendan O'Leary in the Office of In Vitro Diagnostics and Radiological Health. One thing I want to highlight is that none of these guidances redefine what meets the legal definition of a device. These simply discuss our enforcement priorities. So the determination that a device or that a product is under enforcement discretion does not affect whether or not it meets the definition of a device.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
And the next question is from Robert McCrae. Your line is open.
Yeah, good afternoon, Bakul. I have two questions. I think they're related, though. One on NDDS and one on the wellness guidance. And they're related to how you can think about risk. So with NDDS, I'm curious for a little more of your feedback on why you are excluding active monitoring, and specifically perhaps the relevance of the environment where the monitoring takes place, because I think your risk is different in a hospital and at home. And I'm thinking specifically that the risk of not being monitored for a patient who cannot be in a hospital is actually higher than being monitored by a project or a program that is not perfect. And that we essentially expect in hospitals. Similarly, in wellness, the elimination of any reference to any disease or condition, I'm just wondering how the companies promoting these apps and software can actually gain the attention of customers without even mentioning the diseases that the industry believes can be avoided through better lifestyle.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rob. So let me tackle your first question on medical device data systems. So part one answer to that question is fundamentally that we have defined MDDS as in a certain way that excluded active patient monitoring as part of the rulemaking process. So this guidance fundamentally just says that that particular definition as defined in the medical device data system, which already had excluded active patient monitoring, is applicable here for our enforcement priorities, as Brendan had highlighted earlier. And to just give you a little bit of color on what's considered active patient monitoring, it is not about location of where that active patient monitoring is happening. It could be happening in a home or somewhere else or a clinic. But it's more about if you look at the definitions, not the definition, but the background that we had provided in the guidance, it boils down to any device that is intended to be relied upon in deciding to take an immediate clinical action. The key words there are immediate clinical action. And immediate clinical actions can extend many places, and it's not about in a home setting versus not, or it's not about monitoring like people use the word monitoring in a very large sense. We actually try to narrow that down to a very specific application area of monitoring, as you would imagine a bedside monitor, for example. So I would encourage you guys to think about that. On the general wellness part, I'm not sure whether I understood the question. In fact, we are allowing, or the proposal on the table is we are allowing when technologies are intended to promote a healthy lifestyle, but also show through well-understood literature or well-understood science that healthy lifestyles are linked to managing diseases or conditions. We are saying that would also be included under something that we would consider low-risk general wellness devices.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification on NGDS. On the wellness, maybe I misinterpreted the draft guidance and your slide deck, because it seemed to indicate that any reference to a specific disease would change your thinking about the product.
No, so there are two parts. Any general wellness products that are meant to promote healthy lifestyle without any claims of disease would be considered low risk. The part two of what we would consider low risk is products that promote healthy lifestyle, and when it's well known that healthy lifestyle has a correlation to helping certain types of disease or conditions, we'd also consider low risk. It's the healthy lifestyle correlated to the disease or condition. It's not the product. So you have to keep that linkage in mind.
Just need the evidence. Okay, thank you.
And your next question is from Christina Thomas. Your line is open.
Hi, I have a question with regards to the MDDS. In the past, part of the FDA MDDS definition was contained in the part that information could only flow in one direction from a source medical device through the MDDS to the target location. And if there's bidirectional information flow, it would no longer be considered an MDDS. What I want to know is this still the case, that it's only one-way, one-directional, unidirectional? Or, and if that is the case, can you further clarify bidirectional information flow? So by that, as an example, I mean coming from the source device through the MDDS to a destination device, and then back from a destination device through the MDDS back to the source device.
Thank you. So I think you may be referring to the proposed rule that we had done in 2008, where we had talked about the unidirectional mode. When we finalized the rule after public comment, we changed, we used the word transfer of medical device data, where we intended to indicate transfer can be in either direction of the data flowing. Very simplistically, you can think about MDDS as conduits that take data from point A to point B. That's how you would think about it as transfer without actually modifying that data.
Okay, that makes it clear. Thank you.
Your next question is from A.J. Schreck. Your line is open.
Hi. My question may have more to do with what I believe was Robert asked previously with regards to general wellness. But if an app was specifically targeting a disease condition, would the device manufacturer or app manufacturer be able to specify what that condition is, or is the draft guidance veering more towards not allowing a specified condition for these apps?
So I'm not sure whether you have the guidance in front of you, but I can probably actually point to you the two specific types of products that we said we are allowing marketing claims to be is may help reduce the risk of certain chronic disease or may help living well with certain chronic disease. But it's the healthy lifestyle may help reduce the risk of, or healthy lifestyle may help living well with. The key point is if products are promoting healthy lifestyle, we would consider it as lower risk. And if the marketing claim includes healthy lifestyle may help reduce the risk of, or healthy lifestyle may help living well with, we would still consider them to be low risk.
Thank you.
And the next question is from Tracy Fox. Your line is open.
Thank you. Bakul, you mentioned that there was a comment on the draft MDDS guidance to permanently update the regulation. Can you tell us if there are any short-term or long-term plans to actually do that?
Right now, we did receive some comments about finalizing or updating or creating some other mechanism to either create a new regulations or something else. However, at this time, we thought finalizing the guidance itself would provide the immediate clarity that people were seeking for and provide and pave a path towards. I cannot discuss at this time whether we have future plans on how we would go about doing this, or if we were going to go about doing this. But at this point, our intention was to provide the immediate sort of guidance and finalization for both folks in the industry as well as our staff to be able to or enable FDA to implement this policy that we had proposed last year.
Okay, thank you.
And your next question is from Robert Cruz. Your line is open.
Hi, my question is with respect to the draft guidance for accessories. So I'm wondering if you could provide additional clarification for the proposed policy and confirm my understanding that this is kind of advocating for an independence of classification between the parent device and accessory. Now, the second part of that question would be, has it been considered, given this forum, tacked on other guidances such as for 510K submissions of software and the software level of concern?
So this is Sugata Day. To answer the first part of your question, you are correct. The guidance is intended to separate the risk-based analysis for accessories alone versus their parent device. The accessory is considered as used with the parent device, but it could be very possible that the accessory might be determined to have a different risk categorization than that of the parent device. So that is a departure from what's currently done in this space, where most often accessories are usually regulated with their parent devices currently. The answer to the second part of your question is for 510Ks for software accessories, we're not going to differentiate software accessories from accessories. Accessories have their definition as stated in the guidance. It says to support, supplement, or augment the performance of the parent device. That would also apply to a software accessory.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for the clarification.
And so this is Bakul. I just want to add to what Sugata just mentioned. And if you have other, I heard you say about the 510K sort of implications of this guidance. As you look at the guidance and sort of digest it and sort of digest the information as of today, if you think there are things that we should consider as part of the finalization of the guidance, please make sure that you provide that suggestions in the comments.
Yeah, I will make sure to do that more specifically around the software level of concern where my kind of questions stem from.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next question is from Zach Rothstein. Your line is open.
Hi, and thanks, Bakul, and everyone else at FDA for your time today. My question relates back to the second category of general wellness products, and that's those that make claims based on scientific evidence. I think it's great that CDRH has taken this position, but my question is, have you thought about taking it a step further, like CIPSAN does in the food space for qualified health claims, something like how Cheerios is marketed as good for your heart? So it seems to me that if you kind of had a set of what are essentially pre-approved claims based on scientific evidence, both small and large manufacturers wouldn't need to always research and find and determine whether scientific evidence exists and is sufficient for those claims.
Great question. I think we did think through that, and our approach was, given our resources and given our workload, we wanted to be very clear up front, and we were not planning on having a separate program that we would evaluate the validity of the scientific claims, and that's an area that we did consider. But again, if you guys have thoughts on how to best approach it without having CDRH review every single claim that comes through, especially given the volume of mobile apps that may be there that may actually help help people with living a healthier lifestyle. that's the consideration we had to balance. And again, back to my foundational principles of being narrowly tailored and focused, and functionality focus is what we were heading towards.
Right. Thanks.
And the next question is from Troy Jack. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, Bikul. Thank you for sponsoring this today. So we actually have two questions from my side. The first question is surrounding the last page of the MDDS guidance document, which is page 8. And on that page, it states that FDA does not intend to enforce compliance with the regulatory controls, including registration listing, quality system regulation, et cetera. So our first question is, are manufacturers still required to comply with these regulatory controls, even if the FDA does not intend to enforce compliance with those controls? And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure. You said you had multiple questions. I was waiting for more, but I'll answer this one. Yeah, so our intent here is not to enforce if people are in compliance or not for complying with those regulations. That I can't tell you whether to do those things on their own, because we thought at one point in time for sure the following quality system, for example, quality system regulation, is generally good for other reasons. This only sort of confirms our policy going forward that regardless, we would not be enforcing compliance towards this regulation.
Okay. Second question.
Hi, my name is Shelley A. Stryker. The second question that we had, please, was whether or not the devices that fall in these regulations, also on page 8, are they still considered to be devices if there will not be, if there will not be compliance with regulatory controls enforced, are they still considered devices?
So I think Brendan may have answered this as in previous context. These regulations are basically saying these products are medical devices under the section 201H of the FDA&C Act. The guidance provides a compliance policy and our enforcement policy, and where we would enforce compliance towards these products or not.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, if people who are asking questions can come closer to the phone, this webinar is transcribed, so it can be clearly recorded.
Thank you. Your next question is from Kathy Franco. Your line is open.
Yes, my question may have just been answered. Is the FDA still requiring an MDDS device to be included in the manufacturer registration and device listing?
We would not be enforcing our compliance towards people for that particular requirement.
So if we already have an MDDS that is in fact listed, the next time we register, we be pulling it off? Would that be all right?
I will go back to my standard answer. We will not be enforcing compliance to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the next question is from Sarah Baker. Your line is open.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Could you comment on labeling distribution, specifically with reference to patient labeling as part of the mobile medical application? Would it be acceptable to provide the patient labeling as part of the mobile medical application?
Not sure I follow the question, but I'll attempt. I'm looking at others to see if they follow the question. But the types of labeling, for example, if there was a mobile app that would be regulated as a Class 2 medical device and requires review, I think as part of the review, we would have to discuss with the branch and the reviewer what format type media is acceptable for patient labeling.
Okay. So it depends. It's more on specific circumstances and the scenario. So.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. And your next question is from Edward Workney. Your line is open.
You actually answered my question. Thank you, though.
And the next question is from Kathleen Bacon. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. I was wondering if on the classification under the triangle where they're considered low risk but still devices, then because it's part of the software development, do we have to go ahead and translate towards design control if we're already validating through agile processes?
Interesting. So the middle portion is what you're referring to in the triangle.
Correct, sir.
Those products are again under the enforcement policy of not, for FDA not, or making a very clear statement, we would not be enforcing regulatory requirements for that types of product that fit in that area. So the answer is, I'm not sure where you're heading with the question, but that's really what we are saying is we are not going to enforce compliance.
Okay. I think that clarifies it a little bit because essentially because if it is a device and because it does fall under software, the processes for the development of that software is slightly different than the standard linear process of medical device lifecycle development. So because the processes are different, then that suggests that we don't need to do the software definition of, say, something like design transfer, because that technically doesn't exist in software development. You are validating the software as you are creating design input. So in theory, you would not have to translate that to medical device design history file. It could stay as agile software development in just, it could essentially be any software.
So my recommendation to you would be is follow the best practice that suits for your business processes to maintain, whatever requirements you have for safety, etc. That makes sense for you for the design process. But it boils down to is, again, let me reiterate, the triangle is a great depiction of our focus in the area of mobile app. If you're trying to figure out what to do in the gray, the middle area versus the lower, where it's non-medical devices area, it's not something that we are focusing on energy on. I think as you get closer towards the line, towards the top of the triangle, where it becomes a mobile medical app versus under enforcement discretion, I think that's where you can engage FDA to have this conversation. But and the email address I provided on mobile medical apps at fda.hhs.gov is a great place to ask those kind of questions. But at the same time, I would encourage people to think not to do things because there are regulations, but think what's best for the product and for the patients.
Okay, I appreciate your time. That clarifies it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Michael Sias. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you. My question was actually just answered. Thanks.
And the next question is from Jody Coleman. Your line is open.
Hi. Regarding the guidance for MDDS, medical image storage devices, and medical image communication devices, is it correct then to assume that these devices will not be required to be registered in the Global Unique Device Identification Database?
I may have to differ on that, but really on a very broad, you can probably ask the question to DICE, but at a very high level, I would say that since we are not enforcing regulations on those devices, we would not expect the same. We would probably have the same approach towards other regulations such as UDI.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Anita Walk. Your line is open. Anita, please check your mute button. Your line is open. And the next question is from Lee Leichter. Your line is open.
Yes, I would like to ask about the use of an MDDS or an MMA that is used in conjunction, that is considered a device, that is used in conjunction with a drug, either to record drug values or used by the user in some way in conjunction with their drug therapy. Does the fact that this is a device used with a drug make this a combination product? And if it does it in any way change the enforcement discretion or the application of the regulations as you have described in these guidances?
I'm having a hard time thinking on the spot that an example of what you just described, but I think this would also be a great question to ask either in the Mobile Medical inbox to tease that out. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a team here of senior leadership that get together on a regular basis to discuss these kind of issues. And if this is one area we need to provide clarity, we would discuss this and provide clarity.
Okay, thank you.
And the next question is from Shri Kaushik. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Shri Kaushik. First off, everybody from CDRH and Buckle, thank you very much for your presentation. My question stems from all the discussions that just happened, and I'm sort of confused. The fact that the enforcement discretion mobile apps are considered to be medical devices, but FDA is saying they're not going to do enforcement, doesn't preclude them from register and listing, because Class 1 devices also have to register and list and also have to have design controls. Am I missing something where the answers I heard seem to suggest that that is not a requirement for an app that falls within the enforcement discretion of FDA.
So we can dive down to deep conversation on this, but fundamentally it boils down to is folks and manufacturers may choose to comply with the regulations, and all we are saying is that's not an area that we would be focusing our enforcement resources on.
No, I understand that that's not the area that you guys are focusing on, but what you're saying is coming off of as a manufacturer doesn't have to actually register and list. At least to me. I don't know if anybody else has the same confusion. But that's how I'm hearing it, and I'm not sure if I'm hearing it correctly.
It's
still a Class 1 device, yes?
MDDS is a Class 1 device, and if there is requirements that are not met by a certain manufacturer, and it could include the ones listed in the guidance, we would not be enforcing or we would not be requiring compliance to those.
Okay, I guess I have to ask this question to DICE because, again, I'm still hearing that we don't have to register and list and also follow design controls because you're not going to enforce it. But that goes against the Class 1 general controls requirements that are in the, for any device considered to be a medical device.
Yeah, you can go ahead and ask the question to DICE or the mobile medical apps in email as well, and we can get back to you.
Thank you.
And your next question is from Kelly Wynn. Your line is open.
Hi, yeah. Relative to the MDDS guidelines, I think previously it called out specifically that plotting data graphically was excluded from the MDDS classification. Is that still the case? Could you speak to that a little?
Yes. So MDDS regulations don't include plotting of data. It's the display of exact data that's generated by the medical device. However, if you take MDDS in combination with the policy described in the mobile medical apps guidance, you'd see that combination of plotting it data along with transferring the data is sort of fits into the same consistent approach that highlighted in either the mobile medical apps guidance and in MDDS guidance.
Okay, so just to clarify, so if we take data, transfer it from a device and plot it graphically, that would fall under the MDDS guidelines?
So no. So MDDS guidelines are specifically talking about the definition of MDDS and the MDDS regulation. So MDDS regulation defines an MDDS to do certain functionality. There are other functionalities like plotting, etc., with the data that the MDDS, which is responsible for transferring or storing, were highlighted in the mobile medical apps guidance that we also said would be under enforcement discretion. All I'm saying is if you are plotting data but you're taking data and having a functionality that takes data from a medical device, those two functionalities in combination taken together as a general approach from CDRH would be under enforcement discretion, and they could come from as a combination of the MDDS guidance as well as the mobile medical apps guidance.
Okay.
Thank you. The next question is from Murat Daki. Your line is open.
Thank you. I have two questions. One, with regard to patient monitoring, are devices that provide secondary or tertiary alarm notification subject to MDDS or not? And secondly, if a company only has devices that fall within the spectrum of items that you've mentioned in these guidance documents and nothing else, are they subject to establishment registration and inspections or not? Thank you.
Hi, this is Linda Ritchie again. I'm only going to cover the first part of your question with regards to secondary or tertiary systems for monitoring. If the systems for secondary or tertiary monitoring are used in active patient monitoring, then they still would be actively regulated as a primary monitoring system. An example of this is like a nurse call station in a hospital that is connected to the primary monitoring system at the patient's bedside. Those types of secondary monitors are still actively monitored as they're used for active patient monitoring. Can you repeat the second half of your question, please?
Are entities that have devices that fall within these two guidance documents only required to register as an establishment and subject to inspections? I'm assuming you're referring to mobile medical apps guidance and MDDS guidance, I take it. Yes.
And if a product that is considered a mobile medical app, that is the top of the triangle that we would focus our oversight on, they would still be subject to the same regular rules and enforcement policies that we have today for other Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 devices. Things below that line on the tip of the triangle, either it fits in either that functionality or types of products are in the other categories outside of the small triangle, or it fits into the medical device data system guidance. All we're saying is, if you fall there, if your product falls there, we would not enforce, which means that enforcement means inspections as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the next question is from Ryan Meyer.
Yeah, hi there. So I'll try and ask this so that it makes sense, but I'm kind of hearing a couple different things, and this goes back to a couple questions with the gentleman who had some confusion. And it sounds like there's a set of rules, right, that apply to a medical device. Class 1, mobile medical device, or MDDS, whatever. are you saying these rules don't apply, or are you saying they're just not going to enforce these rules?
The latter.
Okay, so I mean that's kind of to me that's almost. I mean, without it sounding bad, but I mean, it's kind of like talking out of both sides of your mouth, right? Saying, okay, well, this stuff applies. We're not going to come out and make sure that you're doing it, but, what if something bad happens? Then all of a sudden, is it like, oh, wait, you should have been following this to begin with? I mean, it just sounds like you're not taking a proactive approach and going out to enforce, but, hey, you better have a quality system and register and do all of that stuff, design, development controls, the whole work, that's going to be the case.
This is about focusing the resources that we have. I think we're taking the approach that, we're not going to exercise active enforcement discretion. This is kind of analogous to maybe a local police department saying, we're not going to issue a ticket for going 5 miles over the speed limit. The law still says you can't go over the speed limit. You as a company, in this case as a driver, you have to make the decision, am I going to go over the speed limit or not? The department just saying, we won't give you a ticket. It's still your decision, and it's probably in your best interest to do it. It's just we're not going to, actively apply enforcement discretion.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is there a scenario where you would enforce it?
So as we had articulated in our mobile apps guidance, we have said that we would engage in an open public dialogue and feedback if we were to change that decision in light of other information that we have collected.
You're saying if you were to change a decision about not actively enforcing?
Correct.
So until you guys come back to some public dialogue, nobody's getting busted for breaking the speed limit?
In Sagata's world, yes.
Okay. Okay. I suppose that adds some clarification, but doesn't seem to alleviate anything that we need to be doing on this side if we want to make sure that we're managing our risk.
We expect you to manage your risk as you would normally do in other ways for other reasons. All we are saying is from a regulatory perspective and our compliance perspective, we would be not focusing in that area.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question for today's call is from David Hirschhorn. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Dr. David Hirschhorn, a radiologist. I noticed that out of the mobile medical apps definition, you said that you struck the word display from there. So where does that leave us with regard to displaying medical images on mobile devices, both for clinical reference and for primary diagnosis?
I'm going to turn it over to Brendan here.
Hi, this is Brendan O'Leary again in the Office of In Vitro Diagnostics and Radiological Health. We do have some language in the mobile medical applications guidance on display of radiological images on page 25. We say that mobile apps that are not intended for diagnostic image review, and it provides some more specific examples of that, would be considered medical image communications devices, which the medical device data systems guidance now puts under enforcement discretion. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. That clarifies it. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
And there are no other questions in queue at this time.
Thank you. This is Irene Ihir. We appreciate your participation and thoughtful questions. Today's recording, along with the slide presentation and transcript, will be available on the CDRH webinar page at www.fda.gov/CDRH webinar by Thursday, March 5th. If you have additional questions about the final and/or draft guidance documents, please use the contact information provided at the end of the slide presentation. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Again, thank you for participating. This concludes today's webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.